The following podcast features people who disagree. They will argue. They will fight. They will be firm in their opinions and beliefs. But they won't hate each other, which is pretty much the way it ought to be.
Hey, welcome to Opposite Ends Still Friends. I'm your host, Haley Bright. And like we said last week, this is a different type of political podcast. Mike and Tim are not political scholars, authors, pundits, just two ordinary guys that have been lifelong friends and have extremely different political opinions. Mike is a very liberal Democrat and Tim is a very conservative Republican. If you guys listen to last week's episode, you'll know that we were on a very in-depth discussion on January 6th. We're going to pick up right where we left off. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go back, give that a listen, and let's pick up with Tim. Tim, you were talking about Trump and how a lot of this is blamed on him.
Yeah, and Mike made it clear. In his mind, nothing makes sense except Trump accomplished a goal. And the goal wasn't successful, of course, but he accomplished it. He got a bunch of people to do something for his aims. And this included violence and included going in the Capitol. And, of course, the aim, which makes this sort of cuckoo in my mind, the aim, it never could have come true. I think you can make a simple case as you think through Trump. He's the one that orchestrates, incites, and everything. The more he's able to do that, more people went in the Capitol and had the violence, the more the people inside the Capitol, in the Senate, that are certifying the vote are going to certify the vote. So just logically, you got to step back and say, that's politics, that's Trump. And it doesn't make any sense to connect that in that simple narrative. The January 6th committee tried to make it into a miniseries and make everybody believe it. That's how it worked. Instead, I think, Mike, you got to really step back and look at the actual events of the day and say, yeah, there's a lot of politics. There's a big crowd. There's protests. People don't believe the count was valid or the votes are valid, and they wish that something could be done, but we're going full steam ahead. And then there's some real actions that allowed, from a lack of intel being put into place with the National Guard, if that's the intel was true, they let people in and all the way up to different parts of the Capitol. Some parts had the SWAT team, some parts had nothing, some parts had the Capitol Police shooting tear gas into the Capitol Police and having them back up into the Capitol. And then you had people breaking windows, and those people should all be found and go to jail. We all agree there. But what makes sense is who's in charge of sort of the scenery, so to speak, the different parts of the Capitol complex building, and who's in charge of just what's happening and keeping it down the path until people are let in. Well, Trump didn't let people in. But what makes sense is there's something at play political to go after Trump, to set up Trump. And then you get things, Mike, you got to address the pipe bomb. Did one of his guys plant that? Well, I would certainly hope the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Secret Service would find the pipe bomb. They have video. And some stories I've read that they actually know who it is, but they're not going to pursue it. Things like this are all in part of the message that, hey, we've got a couple of redundancies, and this makes sense to me. We got all these media, all these video, all these photographers, the media's on board, and now we got a committee, and we're going to make this work. Trump is bad. He's at fault. And again, very simple. Draw the line. It makes sense. Why? With the Democrat Party that's in control of all these agencies in all these areas? Because they want it to be an insurrection. And under the 14th Amendment, that term is used that would prevent Trump from being ever near any office. Because
So you feel like
him.
they almost set him up in a way.
And they did it. So I think this is to really play the movie, Mike and Haley. I think there's a gal that's sitting in a room with all these smart Democrats and said, hey, I got an idea. We got this intel, and they've been doing it. Hey, if we do this and do this and do this, and hey, we probably need some pipe bomb. That's a good story too. We could use it. And they actually say, why do you have this idea? Because guys, look at the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. If we can claim and set the miniseries, the insurrection 7-week miniseries, and the American people buy it, Trump is done. What we fear, we can get rid of. And I think there's somebody that is going to sooner or later say, hey, it was my idea.
Okay, all right.
That makes
Well,
sense.
let's not assume she's a woman. I'm just going to go on and
I
state
don't know
there.
what
But,
that has to do with anything.
They're more
but
creative.
at any rate-
well, we are very creative. Mike, what do you think about this?
Tim, I love you, but I think you're nuts. So here's the thing. I love conspiracies. I love conspiracy movies. They're fun, but they're movies. They're fiction. They're make-believe. They're entertainment. They're not real life. To me, it's as simple as Trump did not want to lose. And he tried all these other methods. He tried the courts. You can't deny that. He tried threats. You can't deny that. And then he tried to get Pence to overturn the votes. You can't deny that. So noon on January 6th, Trump begins speaking to his supporters at a rally near the White House. We will never give up. We will never concede, Trump tells the cheering crowd. He then calls on Pence as president of the Senate to reject Biden's win and send the votes back to the states. Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country, Trump says. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. Meanwhile, Trump supporters head to both the Arkansas and Idaho state Capitol buildings. And even before Trump ends his speech, crowds from his rally start to gather outside the U.S. Capitol. So, yeah, I agree with that. They started going before he ended his speech because he was riling them up. He had these tweets talking about January 6th for weeks before this actually happened. The whole idea was to stop the count, to send the count back to the states, then to have the states overturn and send their own electors. That was what that whole fake electors thing was. I don't know how you can say this sounds crazy, because this was the plan. Eastman said it was the plan. Chesborough said it was the plan. This was the whole concept. This was the whole idea. Anything to prevent Trump from losing the election, to have a free and fair election overturned, because he simply could not accept losing to Biden. He'd said it forever. He'd said, if he wins, it's rigged. There's no way I can lose to this guy. Went on and on. And, you always say I have a TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, right? But I say you have TDS, which is Trump denial syndrome, that you deny who this guy is. His mentor was Roy Cohn. And if you ever looked at Roy Cohn, you would see what kind of a horrible human being that guy was. And this was Trump's mentor. All he cares about is himself. He doesn't care about the country. The only reason he's running now is to try to skate out of these legal problems. He doesn't care about it. And he's also power hungry, too. He's power mad.
Well,
he
let's
doesn't
stay
care
on the
about
topic
any of
of
this
January
stuff.
6th
All right,
as well.
fine. Fair enough. But at any rate, that's what I'm saying. That's who this guy is. He didn't want to lose. He can't accept losing, because that's what he's always used against people, right? That's his insult. You're a loser. You're a loser. You're a loser.
Well, wait, Tim,
That's
what do
his
you
whole
think?
thing.
What do you think Trump wanted from January 6th, Tim?
Well, TDS is real. You just showed the symptoms. You literally are just in something, Trump. And I'm telling you, you laid out, and it does make sense. Trump, whatever information he had, whatever personality he has, whatever political goals he had, which are all within the realm of, I think we all accept it in our politics. Yeah, he wanted to stop the count, and he wanted, as you laid out, let's go down there, guys, and let's get Pence to send it back to the states. And I don't want to digress into political science. We could have a political science show, I guess. But Mike, that right there is good. There's nothing wrong with that. Where it breaks apart. So Trump,
of course there's something wrong with it. There was no fraud in the election.
Well,
of course there's something wrong with it.
So
it
Mike,
is overturning the will of the people. It is overturning what the states wanted. Of course there's something wrong with that. How can you say there isn't?
Wait, there's nothing. It didn't overturn. So this is the breakout, because.
But it would have. The only reason it didn't overturn is because Pence said, I can't do it.
Okay.
Pence even sent out, he said his votes were largely ceremonial. He will not act as Trump asked. You can't do it. All the vice president does is to supervise the counting. That's it. It was an insane theory, but Trump believed it because people told him to believe it, and he wanted to believe it because he didn't want to lose.
Tim, what do you think?
We're talking into the political science, the process, as I call it. And there is something that happens, and I'm not the expert, and we could follow up, I'm sure, and talk about it. But, all this also happened in 2016. There were Democrats at that January 6th that stood up in front of the vice president overseeing it that said, I dispute. I say this isn't right. And that's a process that I do know that occurs. And that is a process that did occur. So what my point is, where it does make sense that Trump, being political, being his personality, being his ambitions for future, and being informed with whatever data he has, and it's all mixed together, it's not as simple as some conspiracy, he's trying to say, hey, Republicans, there's issues, we need to do something today. And hey, crowd, you need to go down there and protest peacefully and fight fight, because if this is not done right, we're in trouble. All of that makes sense, and I'm giving it to you. The bridge that's too far is when all of a sudden you say, oh, then they broke in and they overran the police. Oh, and they set a pipe bomb. Oh, and they did all this stuff, which came out is not true inside the Capitol, other than walk around and get tours and sort of high-five police, and then policemen walked them out and they went home. That's where it breaks down. So that's the part that I wish you saw. What makes sense to go back to last episode? Who let these people in? It wasn't Donald Trump. It wasn't Donald Trump's motives, as we're saying, to turn the count back to the states.
Question, just a simple yes or no. Would they have been there were it not for Trump? Yes or no?
Well, it's beyond Trump.
Oh, I see what Tim's saying.
Would they have been there were it not for Trump? Would they have been at the Ellipse were it not for Trump? Would they have stormed the Capitol were it not for Trump? Just a yes or no.
Of course, Mike, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with them storming the
Tim's saying it's
Capitol.
a bigger picture.
That was storming the Capitol is where I was trying to go last episode, and we continued because you reached a point where you admitted, yeah, people were let in. So we can go
why?
back to
Free
oh
speech.
my goodness.
But why were they there? They were there because of the election
Protest.
lie, because Trump kept saying the election was
Protest.
rigged and stolen, which it wasn't. There was no evidence of any of it.
That is something that's fundamental to this country. Hopefully you're not against it. Free speech means free speech. This is not yelling fire in a movie theater. This is somebody that gets their information, and freedom of information is important, and they are there to protest. Many of them have been coming before, and they're there because they're like, hey, there's something funny with these votes. There's something in a certain states. And, hey, we're counting on our senators to say, hey, there's an issue. And then Pence does have, I think, in a political process, the ability. The problem is we wouldn't even be talking about this. It would have been lost in the dustbin of political rallies if not for the people being let in. That's my point. And
well,
it doesn't make
sense. If not
sense
for the people who broke in and stormed the Capitol.
Again,
and the fact is they were all there based on a lie. If Trump had conceded the election, would any of this have happened? Yes or no?
Mike, if he conceded, then no, there's no rally.
There
There's
you go.
probably a couple
That's
of
it.
People.
That's it.
But you can't.
He knew
Mike,
he lost. This was stated in the January 6th committee. He pushed all this stuff. It was a lie. It was a lie because he did not want to lose. But he knew he lost. This was said over and over and over again by Republicans in the Trump administration. Bill Barr said it, that he knew he lost. But he kept pushing this lie, pushes it to this very day. This is not a one-off. This continues on. And he pushes this, and he riles these people up. And one of the reasons that this country is so divided politically is because of him.
Well, hold on. I guess that goes into another topic. Tim, there's clearly a reason you and many, many people in America want Donald Trump to be president. What's the pull towards him over another political candidate?
Oh, absolutely. And those are things that are normal, right, in our political process for centuries since we started. The election issues, it's always been something that somebody says. I think if you're rational, you're saying, well, Trump elevated because Trump is Trump. He has a way to say things that other presidents didn't. When you have an election that statistically raises eyebrows, then it gives somebody like Trump something to talk about, and then he animates it, and then people start to listen.
What do you mean statistically raises eyebrows? It raised eyebrows on the right, but there was no evidence of anything.
There were very many questions about our systems and our processes. And they're lingering from 2020 and even began in 2016 when the Democrats is on the other hand, where they were the ones doing this. But everybody's like, yeah, whatever. There was nobody on the Democratic side in 2016 that had the animation or the words or the outsiderness. I could use that. Trump has a feature that nobody else can match, and I think that's why they fear him.
Let me just address this real quick. You keep bringing up 2016. Just to be clear, so this is what occurred in 2016.
Let's still stay on the topic of January.
That's fine. He keeps bringing this up, so I think I should respond.
Okay.
So 7 congressmen argued the election was tainted by Russian interference and voter suppression. They were overruled because none of their objections had required support from a senator, which wasn't the case in 2020. The Congress people raised the objections and the senators supported the objections. So what happened in 2016, it was nothing. It was 7 people saying we think the election was tainted. You can't compare it to what happened in 2020. It's comparing apples and oranges.
You can compare it. You can compare anything like this because you can compare it because it was an election that the people that lost were claiming and the media was reinforcing at that time. But it didn't, my point is it didn't go anywhere like it does in 2020. The big reason is because you're right. This guy that's an outsider can actually say the words that get people to listen. Back then it's like whatever. Two things. The second thing is when you have that sort of shift where people are saying that, in a presidential election, well, next time it's going to get bigger, in my opinion. And that's where we are. So this time will probably be bigger. And I think we can handle it. We just need to not find the divisiveness, find things that we agree, and we should be looking ahead. But it comes back to your point. I want to bring it back to Pence. Pence had some process, and Trump was trying to give his opinion and say, yeah, it's whatever it is, get it, don't certify. But at the end of the day, he didn't get it done. It got certified. Just the feature that people are coming to protest and it moves into this escalated called violence, that's going to make the people in the Senate shut down, certify, go home.
Trump, who is not the most analytical thinker, tried this. This was his last thing to play, to start this. And this was supposed to go on for weeks, and there was going to be martial law and all this stuff. This was all part of Chesborough's plan and probably Eastman's as well. These were the people that Trump was listening to and who were putting the plan together.
Your narrative is that Trump orchestrated this, and now you're saying, well, he had a couple of guys behind him that really came up with it. None of this makes sense, and I'm trying to encourage you to just open up, widen a little bit. And then my big point is that what you think makes sense would never have happened. Anybody rational, any lawyer is saying, look, I'd say that this guy, any rational, responsible lawyer
These were
would
not
say,
rational
hey,
people, Tim. Rational is not trying to overthrow a free and fair election. Trump is not rational.
I'm trying to find agreement that what makes sense of who's responsible for that day. If you say, well, you know, these people are crazy, well, you got a problem. So your whole thing is based on crazy people. Mine's not.
Yes.
This creative.
This
go with me.
This was
go
all
with mine.
completely irrational. Yes.
I got it. So,
that's why it didn't work.
I got it. But
if I attempt a robbery and I fail, was that attempted robbery? Do I go to jail for that, or do we just let that skate?
this is a good analogy. Let's say you want to go rob a bank this afternoon and you don't wear any clothes and you didn't take a gun and you just had a crayon. I don't think you're going to get arrested for robbing a bank because it makes no sense. You got no way to rob the bank. You're going to be arrested for being a cuckoo. Now you go to what makes sense is that there is an intel that is prevented for coming. There's a pipe bomb that nobody seems to care about, and that is weird.
Let's jump on the pipe bomb for just a hot second then.
Yeah, let's do that. This is from ABC. It says, between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. on January 5th, 2021, a hooded figure with Nike shoes and a severe gait was seen on camera footage placing what were ultimately 2 live pipe bombs outside the DNC and RNC, according to investigators. The person is completely covered. You can't see anything on their face. The FBI is still offering a $500,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the suspect. One of the challenges in the investigation is that there wasn't a lot of video footage captured in the area, according to the former official who led the investigation. People surmise and suspect that, there's all this video all over the country, all over D.C. It's not true. Stephen D'Antonio, the former head of the FBI Washington field office, testified before the House Judiciary Committee on June 7th, 2023. D'Antonio testified that the DNC didn't have a good video system at the time. That system has since been upgraded. So that's one of the reasons they can't find this person, because they don't have good video footage. They don't know who it is. I know you said you heard that. I've seen nothing yet. And if they know who it is, I believe it would be in this article.
What do you think, Tim?
Well, and you got to dig two things. Very simple theme, and it goes to what makes sense. Where's the media reports and the media asking questions? It doesn't happen. Something's fishy with the
Tim,
government.
This is ABC. Is that the media?
Well, they're not
everyone
asking.
does have their own place they like to get media.
Right. And ABC, none of that reporting is asking any real questions about where was it? Who was it? Because somebody put those bombs there for a reason. And again, you do know they never would have gone off. These were bombs planted the night before that could never have gone off on January 6th. Another question that the media should ask. That's number one. Number two is, when you look at these pipe bombs, what were their effect? In the scheme of what I think makes sense, somebody, this creative person said, hey, let's go add another feature in case we need it. And that's why it starts
Well,
to
Steve
ask
Sun,
questions.
the former head of the Capitol Police, who you've quoted previously, said he believed it was a diversionary tactic. He believed it was to call off Capitol Police to go focus on this to leave the Capitol more vulnerable.
Exactly. And that's what made him evacuate and stop the count. But when
I haven't heard that.
well, that's what he testified.
I looked at the testimony. I didn't see that.
You got to read. We're moving around, but this is good. From the pipe come to the head of Capitol Police. January 6th committee never interviewed him. He wrote an 8-page letter because he's like, I'm going to get the record straight. That was all about the intel and the things he did in the first 72 minutes where he was begging for 40 times for help and he got none. The National Guard, all of that dynamics that is really bad. And you got to ask the question, if somebody wanted to stop what was going on because Trump, they would have acted in response to Sun. That's a big thing. And here's another one, Mike. You know, he did an interview with Tucker. Have you watched it? Have you seen it? Have you heard about it?
No.
Lately, he's been having some interviews with people that,
yes,
are interesting at least. He had an interview, and the story is it's never become public because that was one of the reasons he got fired and let go, because that was what he was moving on, and they stopped it. Now, that's Fox News, and we can go there about the media, but my point is, if you listen, it's out there. It got leaked, and the things he's saying reinforce this isn't about Trump. It makes sense only if you say everything in that world is irrational and doesn't go with any rationality. What makes sense is something in our government is setting up Trump, and it goes to the intel and the response that the government had to the need as people were let in the building. And then when they get in the building, this is the final thing that you got to address. Why didn't the violent people tear up stuff all over the building? And this is another data point. They it was about $1 million. Now it's a little over $2 million.
They did. They tore up stuff all over the building. They rubbed feces on the walls. They stole stuff. They broke windows. That's where Babbitt was shot. She was trying to climb through a window that had been broken that led into the speaker's chambers. They busted stuff. They broke stuff. But here's another question, too. If they needed the National Guard, why didn't Trump just call in the National Guard? He didn't. He could have,
He's not,
but he didn't. Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He's not in the executive branch. It's not. It doesn't work that way, and you know it.
So the governors of the neighboring states, Maryland and Virginia, must also get approval from either the president, the vice president, the secretary of defense, or the secretary of army to bring their National Guard units into the city, even if the mayor asked them for help. So Trump could have approved it, but he didn't. And if you listen to the January 6th, they were saying, you've got to call in the National Guard. And all he did was sit and watch the riot on TV. That's all he did.
Mike,
That's all he did for hours because he was enjoying it. And again, Tim, it brings us back to your.
Is that a fact, though, Mike?
Yes, that was testified in the January 6th committee. I believe it was Kathy Hutchinson who testified. That was said under oath.
She wrote that in her
January
book too.
6th
I bet. Did she write that in her book?
She may have.
A lot of those people that they got to testify against Trump have written nice books.
Yeah,
but
look,
so
what? They were all under oath. Not one person who said they lied was under oath. Everyone.
Let's get back to the National Guard, because that goes to what I'm saying. If you showed and found evidence, which it doesn't exist because he's in the executive branch, that he was requested by Sun during that day for National Guard and he said no, you'd have a case. You'd like, well, let's ask the question.
He didn't say no. He just didn't respond.
Mike, he didn't get asked. That's my point.
How do you know that? How do you know?
Well, because of Sun's testimony in his letter. He wrote explicitly what he did for 72 minutes when the people, before they came in the Capitol, when they're coming up, and people, of course, she asked the question, how did they get up? There's a lot of questions there. But as they're going up there, he's repeatedly on the phone asking for help.
Yeah, but not to the president. He's asking other people, and Trump could have said, send in the Guard. Trump could have done that,
Mike,
but he didn't.
It doesn't work that way. This guy is in charge and is a professional. He knows what he needs to do. He, in his testimony and his interview, he said that the questions aren't asked, why was I told no? And it was continually the optics. And then he requested, this was interesting, and you probably never heard this. It's in the Tucker interview. He requested other states to come because he's in D.C. The New Jersey policemen showed up before the National Guard from D.C. He called in police and they showed up to help because he put the word out through his channels for you to say, oh, well, he should have called President Trump. That's cuckoo. So you got to go back to, this is initially intel that is public that said you needed to do more. He was not informed, and he has an issue with that. And then when it was happening, he was not given the response. And you got to ask how the processes work in the Capitol with the architect and all the way up to Pelosi. You should be asking those questions, not dismissing them. And then you got the pipe bomb over here. Let's say it's a diversion. Who, what? Find the guy. And back to that, the video issue that I've read, and this is very important, just in the picture of makes sense. They have 2 cameras on that video at the DNC. They have only released partial of one video that if they release the full amount, you could see the guy's face potentially. That's a fact.
That's not a fact.
It is.
Calling something a fact doesn't make it a fact. That is not in this article that seems to be thoroughly researched. And again, D'Antonio, who was the gentleman in charge, said the DNC didn't have a good video system at the time. People say there's all this footage. It's just not true.
Complaint, Mike. It's not complaint, hey, show us other cameras. You're right. They didn't have a lot of cameras. There was one camera that they show. You've watched the video.
But he said they didn't have good video footage. So if there was another camera, it may not have even been good footage. You don't know that. It's not
the issue, and this is representative of how you're repeating something that you read. It's not about another camera. The cameras are 2. The video that could see him when he sat there, they show before and after, and they have not and will not release so far, even though they're being requested by the congressional hearing. And that's important because my point that makes sense is we have something, believe it or not, it's not about Trump, but it is. The government is doing something. January 6th is a great example to set up scenarios, set up a narrative, and actually control it. Why? To get Trump. It's about Trump, but not in your way. And you got to ask, to really shift a little bit, what is the fear they have of Trump? And I think January 6th shows it, in my opinion, Mike, because they're trying to go after that 14th Amendment data point that he did an insurrection.
First off, the 14th Amendment was only brought up in 2 states. The other states have knocked it down. The Supreme Court is not going to let it go through. And I believe he incited insurrection. And he's also given aid and comfort to the insurrectionists by saying he wants to pardon the January 6ers and all that. So I believe that is legitimate. But the Supreme Court's not going to let it fly. And,
so wait, we agreed.
What?
We got to pause, Mike. We're agreeing. So you're saying right now Trump states that have said to Trump, you cannot be on the ballot in the fall because of January 6th, our topic.
Yeah, because they looked at the definition of insurrection.
Right.
They looked at the Constitution, and they said, you can't be. And remember, his attorneys are not denying that there was an insurrection. They're saying he was not an officer of the state. He was the president. So he couldn't be responsible because the insurrection clause only applies to officers of the state. So they're not denying that all this happened.
I guess when I get really late at night and need some sleep, I'll probably dig that up and read it. But let's come back to the topic. So I'm going back to what makes sense. Hopefully you see a lot of the events make sense that something's going on. And I'm going back to this creative gal.
Yes, something is going on. Something Trump did not want to lose. He incited an insurrection I'll give you, I won't say an insurrection. He incited a riot to overturn the count so he could stay in power. That's what's going on. That's what happened.
So, Tim, on that note, what do you think happened? Because I feel like Mike's been really strong on his.
Right. And that's the equivalent of robbing a bank naked with a crayon. I mean, you can try, but it makes no sense. And you probably.
It's robbing a bank with a weapon because the people that he incited were his weapon.
So, Mike, there were no weapons. Nobody of those people that are in the Capitol had any weapons. So when you want to repeat a narrative, it's important because...
Well, and it also depends what you consider a weapon. Do you consider bear spray a weapon? Do you consider flagpoles a weapon?
Aluminum baseball bat. Do you consider that? Sure. But you should say what it is. But these are not weapons that are intent to overthrow a government, much less go in and break through the building, which didn't occur. So I want you to be clear. When you keep saying what you make sense, because I think everybody's heard it over and over and over, it gets over here where, yeah, you can rob a bank being naked with a crayon. You can go in and say, hey, I'm robbing a bank, but it's irrational. And that's my point. So we can go back and revisit any of those features. We've covered it a lot. What you've got to move over is to hear me and say, Tim, I wish that's irrational. It's not. I'm going to say the creative gal that said, hey, I got an idea. These people are coming. The intel's here. Let's set a stage and put the media and let people in and then do the committee and do all these things. Why? For the word that's in the 14th Amendment. for that word. This person, this creative saying, hey, this is how we can take him down, because we've got to take him down. And now, even back then, I think, hey, it may be this gal in my scenario
Well,
is
let's
from
call
Colorado.
it just a person for now, just in case.
I'm just giving her credit because it's really smart. This person is smart. Don't get me wrong, and they have a connection to Colorado or Maine.
This magical person. Okay, that's fine.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Would you believe the movie?
It makes sense. Hold
on.
on. Just to be clear, it makes sense that some mythical person created this whole scenario. You're absolutely right. That makes complete sense. Sorry.
So Mike, there's somebody that comes up with these ideas, and of course, I think these people are smart. Let's not get wrong. Don't take me the wrong way. These people are the smartest people in the room, okay? And they're political. And somebody like this, what I'm saying is, if you saw the movie, you could walk out of there like, that made sense. That story made sense. Your movie, it's equivalent of the guy that's trying to rob a bank with nothing on. It just doesn't make sense. And you agree because, well,
now,
you believe it because it's irrational.
Tim, I just want to be clear, and Haley, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on this, but how does it not make sense that, again, Trump lost? He did not want to lose. He tried to overturn the election through the courts. The courts laughed him out because he had no evidence. Then he tried threats. Raffensperger, we have it on tape. It's not made up, where he says, all I need you to do is find me 11,000 whatever votes because that's one more than they had. And then he says, and if you don't do it, it could be bad for you legally. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but it's to that effect. Then he tried to get Pence to overturn it, and Pence wouldn't. Then he incited this crowd, and he said peacefully one time. He said fight and steal, and at multiple times. And he said, if you don't fight like hell for your country, you're not going to have a country anymore. He also said he would march with them to the Capitol, which he didn't. And people went and stormed the Capitol to try to disrupt the count, to send it back to the states, to overturn the votes. That was the plan. How is that any less sense than the insanity you're spewing?
Well, no, Mike, I'm with you. That's what I said. That all makes sense. You didn't finish the movie, and that's where the critical climax of the movie is what happened at the Capitol. So all of that makes sense, and I'm okay with that. And you should be okay, although you realize you're okay. I'm okay with it because it's politics. It didn't amount to nothing. And it certainly...
It amounted to a storming of the Capitol. What do you mean it didn't amount to anything?
Wait, that's where it breaks down. You want to call this a storming of the Capitol, and you're in with the movie. I mean, if we were watching your movie, you got all this early stuff, and I don't know if you do character development or just scenery. You know, it's whatever, politics. If you're interested in it, you like it. But when you get to the end, it's like, poof. The pop didn't occur. You aren't going into the narrative that is real, that the Democrats got a commission to set the message and do a pop. Because we got to convince people that this is what happened.
No, Tim,
that's not in your movie.
That would be in the conspiracy movie.
No, well, I see what Tim's saying, but really the question is if that's what you believe, Tim, which is okay for sure, was it really right to harm these innocent people in the meantime? Because 100-something people got injured in this process. So was that okay?
Right. No, I'm not. Absolutely not. That was last week's podcast. Was like, those people are responsible for their actions. They need to go to jail. But when you ask, how did they get there? You can't look, Mike, this was another thing. Hey, well, they're there because Trump. I get it. They're there because they want to stand up in their opinion of free speech in America, and you can't stand in their way. If it's Trump, Obama, the Snow White, you can't stand in their way. Okay, that's American.
Agreed.
So you can't make that case. So now the end of your movie that fails to make sense of January 6th is you don't go into this miniseries, and that's months, a year later, political for the midterms. You're not going to go into the pipe bomb because that's like, how do I fit that in the message? And you're definitely not going to go into the evidence that people are led in and guided through. And then I'll add one more. You're not going to go into the character development of the Proud Boy guy because it goes against it. These guys had their own regime, their own system. They were doing it. Yes. Were they incited in their own politics by Trump's politics? Yes, that occurs. But they made a decision to do violent acts, and guess what? They're in jail for a lot of time, which is good. But that does not.
Okay. All right. So hold on.
My punchline.
Yeah. Okay.
But my punchline is this: to finish your movie, finish your narrative, you lose rationality because these people are bad, but you want to connect them directly controlled by Trump. And that just, there's no evidence of that.
Now,
And
Tim, hold on. Now,
So we're really in discussion of were they controlled by Trump?
yeah. And and I wouldn't even say controlled. Were they incited? So you say there's no evidence of that. How is there not evidence of that? It's as simple as this. As testified by numerous people in his administration, Trump knew he lost. His lawyers told him he lost. And then he started listening to people like Giuliani and Powell and people that wanted to tell him what he wanted to hear. Because let's not forget, Trump is a mentally ill person. He has narcissistic personality disorder, which is a mental illness. If you don't believe me, look up narcissistic personality disorder, and he checks every box. So he only listened to the people who told him what he wanted to hear. But he knew he lost. He even said to certain people he lost. So this was all based on a lie. If he had simply said, I lost, I concede, I'll try it again in 4 years, would any of this have happened?
Mike,
No.
That's not a question.
No, it's not. It's not a
relevant.
question. It's the whole
That's not
thing
relevant.
of it. Of course
No.
it is.
No,
He knew
wait.
he lost. He lied about this. He lied to incite people. He's still doing it. If he had simply said, I concede, none of this would have happened. So
I
yes,
have to
he
agree with
is.
Mike on that particular point.
So he
I'm not
is
sure
responsible for
it
it.
would have happened.
Of course it wouldn't have. There would have been no riot. There would have been no rally at the Ellipse. There wouldn't even be to this point all this talk of election fraud to this very day.
Mike,
So it was all a lie, and he knew it was a lie. So yes, he is absolutely responsible for it.
Tim, do you think that Trump thought it was a lie?
We're getting into his thought of election, which is, I think even now, no, he thinks there was some, funny business in the key states that he
of
lost
which there was
during the
no
election.
evidence. He continues
Well,
to say it. I
that's
agree. There's no
again,
evidence.
That's
And the January 6th committee, almost everyone who testified under oath said he knew he lost. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to hear it, but he knew he lost. So this was all predicated on a lie. He lies. I hate to break it to you. So
Tim, do you
this
think
was
he
all
knew he
predicated.
Of
lost? Do you
course
think he knew
not.
he lost?
He doesn't. He, in his speech recently, even said, I'm not going to concede, because in his mind, and Mike, this is important. It's a different podcast topic because you've moving it way over there. And the
No,
thing
this is all relevant to January
Well,
6th.
in your
January
opinion-
6th would
in
not
your
have
opinion.
happened if he
Mike.
hadn't lied. So
Mike,
he is responsible.
listen, that's very weak thinking, okay? Because January 6th happening, you've got to go to the bottom line, which we thought we were. It happened because a lot of people were let in. A lot of people. The intel that was provided was not distributed. Those
Would they
things
have
are
been
real.
there to begin with had
Listen.
Trump not lied about the election?
And again, that's
Yes or no?
not relevant question.
No, again, would they have been there to begin with had Trump not lied about the election?
So Mike,
So it goes like, if there wasn't an egg, would there have
Right.
been a chicken?
Yeah, maybe we'll wrap up on this and you'll see how empty it is. Absolutely. Protesters against the Democratic Party and the election outcome and certification of the vote, there were hundreds, I think a couple 100,000 people protesting it. Would they have been there if Trump had not encouraged them to be there? There'd probably be some, but not as many. You got it. So what does that matter? It isn't what happened. The people gathering is not an issue. You've got to admit that. But you want to go back and say, well, because he believed a lie, he did this, they did that, and all of these people showed up. And Israel, we won't talk about it. Then this storming of the Capitol happened. It wasn't that. The thing that makes sense, Trump did not orchestrate what happened once people got to the Capitol. Yes, nobody's going to debate. Trump was the president of the United States. He's been having people come to the Capitol. He's rallying his base, and people came as a result. You surely don't have a problem with that. I know you don't because you're an American. The problem is the issues, the violence, the vandalism, and people getting in the Capitol. Okay, that's the issue. And then this next issue that's tied is the narrative that the Democrat and the media created around it to get an insurrection word to get Trump. Those two things are real. In your movie, your story doesn't want to tie to those. You want to just stick with, well, this guy's bad and he's bad, and guess what? He's bad, and people showed up and did something. No. Why were they let in? Why was the intel not let through? And why weren't they supported, the Capitol Police chief when it was happening? And then why is the narrative so scripted to make it pop to the American people against Trump? The answer is simple in front of you. The word insurrection, the 14th Amendment, the Secretary of State's. And as you said, it's now in the Supreme Court. And I want to agree on something. I think you agree. You're telling me that your opinion is the Supreme Court, which is supposed to decide this soon, is going to throw it out? Well, if that's true, and I mean you hopefully agree because it's un-American, hopefully it's all the Supreme Court. But then doesn't that invalidate a lot of what you're saying? Why is this Colorado and Maine Secretary of State trying to take him off the ballot? If you're right, and Trump has done this, and he is insurrected against the vote, then why don't you support Colorado and Maine? And I know it's hard to.
I do, completely. I don't think he should be allowed on the ballot. I don't think he should be allowed anywhere near public office ever again. And most of the Republicans after January 6th agreed. You can go to Nikki Haley.
I think we're having an election with the voting.
You can go to Nancy Mace. All of these people said Trump was responsible for what happened. You go to the Fox
and should not be on a ballot and should never be elected president again. Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying they all said he was responsible.
Right, but honestly, this is the point that believe, Mike, this is the point you've got to hit. If your narrative, which you agree is somewhat irrational, and that's okay because these people are rational, these people did what you're saying.
I don't agree.
Then they should not be on the ballot. That if what you believe, here's the bottom line. If I was to believe what you believe about Trump and what happened and who's responsible, Trump should never get on a ballot.
Yes, I absolutely.
Okay.
I agree with that.
And
but what I'm saying
that.
is that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is the Supreme Court,
my estimation
but why
is.
Not? Well, I'll tell you, there are a couple of reasons. One is if they pulled Trump off the ballot, we would have a riot that would make January 6th look like an Easter egg.
So wait, slow.
Now,
let's go slow. Let's go slow, one at a time. So that's optics. That's like if the National Guard
it would actually be a danger to the country. It would be bad. But the big thing is they will say, let the voters decide. Even a lot of Democrats are saying that. Let the voters decide. Let's beat Trump at the ballot box, not by having him not be on the ballot. Which I understand that. I get that.
Okay.
Because as somebody said, I think it was it Chris Christie? Somebody said the only way that you're going to stop the MAGA movement is to crush the MAGA movement. So that's why they said, let him be on the ballot. Beat him that way. So while I personally think he should not be on the ballot, he should be nowhere near public office ever again, I get that that's probably not going to happen. But that's just my personal opinion.
No, and we're friends, and we're always friends, but this is very important. So do you believe MAGA needs to be crushed, personally?
The movement as it is now? Yeah. I think it's awful. Sure.
Okay, so that's
I'm not saying conservatives are awful or Republicans are awful, but the MAGA movement that trades on racism and anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice, all that, yes, I think that should be crushed.
Those are specific policies.
And again, that's something that we probably should discuss on another podcast because we're getting off the track here. But I think maybe
no. Let me bring you back because you got to come back to robbing a bank with a crayon. This is what is so nutty about what you're saying. If you believe that MAGA movement, as it is now, needs to be crushed. You're not talking about policies around abortion or policies around this or that. That's politics. That's the party politics. You're talking about crushing a movement that you see and you fear.
Well, and again, those weren't my words. That was
words but you agree with them. No.
I think it was Chris Christie. Yes, of course. I am anti-MAGA. Yes. So am I pro-MAGA or anti-MAGA? I'll go with anti-MAGA. Yes.
Right.
I think it's bad. I think it's bad for the country. Talk about divisiveness and rhetoric and all that stuff. Yes. Will you have people like Green and Kozar and all these, Stefanik, all these people that are people in it, Lake? Yes. I think it's awful. I don't see anything positive about it. Again, I'm not saying conservatives are bad. I'm not saying Republicans are bad. We should have a healthy two-party system. More. I'm bringing more parties. Unfortunately, Trump has taken over your party. So you should be more upset about this than I am. Trump has taken over your party, and he has turned what was a legitimate political party into a cult of personality, a cult of Trumpism, and that is part of the MAGA movement. So yes, I think it should be crushed, but it should be crushed legitimately and legally.
So I think we're hitting on a few topics that would be good for a future episode. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. Tim, I want you to make maybe 30 seconds more of your point. Mike, you can go back and make your point. I'll let you guys wrap each other's points.
Yeah,
so Tim, go
I
ahead.
think Mike, I really appreciate it. I love you, buddy. But the thing you're saying now is,
I love you too, man.
You're speaking the core. If you, and you're just a guy like me, was in charge of the operations at the Capitol on January 6th, and you want to crush MAGA, you want to crush Donald Trump. You can blend it. You can move into policies. That's traditional. That's not what that's about. You aren't crushing MAGA to change policy. You're crushing a movement because you're crushing Donald Trump. They're all together. And here's the thing that it makes your point invalid, and I hear you. If you want to crush MAGA, you want to create a narrative that, hey, this guy did this, and you got to listen to me. It motivates people to push that narrative that want to crush MAGA. At the same time, the people that want to crush MAGA, as we wound up, are the people that have the creative scheme to take advantage of these protests and take advantage of the bad actors and to emphasize that, hey, they did this storming and minimize the reality that, hey, we had intel didn't share. Hey, we didn't give them the National Guard. Hey, we opened doors. Hey, we gave them a guided tour. Those people in charge, not the Capitol Police, not the individuals, not people down here. If there's a crush MAGA, crush Trump going on January 5th, this script makes sense. And yours makes sense to push it, but it's irrational because it didn't happen, couldn't happen, shouldn't. I mean, it just doesn't make sense of what the day. So hopefully you hear my point that crushing MAGA is what it is about in our politics now on one side. And you got to ask, what do they fear with MAGA? I mean, they fear MAGA is going to go after Trump.
Okay, all right, okay, again.
And that's our next podcast.
I get it. We do. This is another thing. So let me just respond real quick, and then I guess Haley will sum up each other's points.
That sounds good.
Okay. So first off, I didn't take the term crush MAGA. That was from somebody else. I think it was Chris Christie. But yes, I do think the movement is bad. Absolutely. But again, I would want to crush them, if you will, or beat them, or what have you, legally and through the vote. I have no problem with conservatives. I have no problem with Republicans. There's nothing that I think MAGA does that's good or positive. Attacks on LGBTQ people, attacks on women, attacks on freedom of choice, attacks on races. I mean, just attacks. That's one reason I wanted to have this podcast, is to show that we can argue and bicker, but we still love each other at the end of the day. As far as the other goes, I think it's absurd to think this was all a plot to get Trump. All you have to do is look at his rhetoric. All you have to do is look at what he did leading up to January 6th. It's obvious. And none of those people would have been there had he not kept fostering this lie that the election was rigged and stolen. None of them would have been injured. Nobody would have died. It wouldn't have happened. But he knew it was a lie. And he kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it simply because he didn't want to lose. He didn't want to give up power, and the people around him didn't want to lose, and they didn't want to give up power. To me, it's as simple as that.
I'm going to give you guys 3 sentences to wrap up in total what the other person said about January 6th. Tim, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, Mike was clear. It's Trump. I think those are 3 sentences.
I think that counts, Mike.
Yeah, I'd throw one more Trump in there, but sure. So Tim, let's see. Crushing MAGA is bad. Trump is an innocent lamb. Let's see. And it was all a setup to invoke the 14th Amendment.
Okay, my correction. It makes sense that there is a setup, and it's happening now in the Supreme Court. Crushing MAGA, that's definitely a good podcast, because I'm not sure how I would define MAGA. If I bought a red hat that said MAGA, I'm a MAGA. That's all it takes. And then, Trump is an innocent lamb. No, Trump is Trump. It's politics, where we are today. But we can still get along. You don't have to, Trump. So I think it's good to keep talking about what actually happened at the Capitol, in the Capitol. And Trump was not driving those people, is my point. there's something else at play, and I'd like to know.
All right. And I
That's fair. And that might be
disagree
something
with
we
your
can
point.
pick up later on in the year.
I think that might
sure.
be another time to revisit. Yes.
So I think we've hit a number of really great and important, I have to say, topics today. Let's definitely pick up some of these on future episodes. We have so many future episodes for you guys to tune into that are going to be just riveting and so interesting. In the meantime, guys, leave some comments down below. Let us know what you think. Do you agree with Mike? Do you agree with Tim? What are the things that really stand out that we've said on this podcast? Also, give us a follow on Facebook, Opposite End Still Friends, and we'll be back next week with another awesome episode talking about another hot topic. Again, I'm Haley Bright here with Mike and Tim. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.